All right, we're live.
Hello,
Go for it,
everyone.
Monique. Hello, hello.
All right. Hello, Latinos in Clinical Research. As per your request, we're going to be going over the Diversity Action Plan to improve enrollment of participants from underrepresented populations in clinical studies. So, the guidance provided by the FDA, we're going to go over an outline that we created later on. More likely tomorrow, we're going to post in our newsletter. That, by the way, please subscribe. We have a newsletter in Spanish, and we're going to be also adding an English version of the newsletter too. So we can start sharing this information with everybody. And the guidance that we're going to be, the FDA guidance that we're going to be doing today is also our discussion, giving our feedback, and obviously, most importantly, your feedback, so we can submit this later on to the FDA with our um, inputs, right? That which is important because at the end of the day, uh, us, the companies or the professionals working in research are the ones that need to put this in place. So
100%.
here we go. Let me just share. Is on where it says present.
Yes, you just be present. And for you guys,
Okay.
please, we remember we did this today to share this because LICR will be submitting our response. And as you know, we love to have the audience feedback. Our members, we want to make sure that your voice is heard because we're here for you and to, try to be a focal point of your voice to the FDA. So please don't be shy. Come on the comments, even say hi. Let us know where you're at right now. We'd love to see where everybody's coming from. And as we go over the sections and the topics, please, provide your feedback and what you feel would be best to be documented and all of those really great things.
Yeah, just give me 1 second because it's not allowing me to share for some reason. Um, Let me see. Let's do it again. Okay, so this is it. All right, let me see. Can you guys see my screen or not?
No, I don't see
No, I
anything
cannot.
yet.
All right,
No.
let me go ahead and I'll pull it up
Let me
then.
just stop the
Yeah.
sharing. 1 second. Let me see if I can do it this way. Uh,
It was the FDA guidance, correct, Monica? Just want to make
The
sure.
summary. The
no,
Yeah.
summary.
the last one I sent today.
Yes.
Okay.
But let me see if this allows me. So, can you see it now?
No, we cannot.
Okay, so then
Oh, here,
going.
I see it now. I can see it now. Go for it, Monica.
Okay, all right.
Share it.
So this is
Awesome.
it.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
so the one that we're going to be discussing is, in fact, this document that probably everybody already has gone through,
Mhm.
which is the Diversity Action Plan, um, that was released in June this year. So here we go.
This is very important too because this is one of the, real official documents coming out on diversity showing the movement towards actual change and potentially implementation. As we know, it's guidelines. It's not necessarily something, fully, I guess you say, set in stone. This is why we're providing our feedback. But again, all the more reason why we need to hear everybody's voices as we're creating this document to give our feedback. Because, if there's a way to make sure that all perspectives are being considered, we definitely want that to happen. So
Yeah, so basically, the purpose of these guidelines or this guidance is to outline the FDA's expectations for sponsors to develop the diversity action plans, and that aim to increase enrollment of underrepresented populations in clinical studies. This includes ensuring diversity in race, ethnicity, sex, and age to improve the generalizability of study results across all populations that will use the drug or devices. Okay, so this is specifically for drug, biologic, or devices. Okay,
Mhm.
so the applicability that the this guidance is are required to certain clinical studies involving drugs, biological products, and devices. Specifically, this diversity action plan are mandated for phase 3 studies or pivotal studies that are used to support marketing applications. Now, it says that is mandated for phase 3, but if a study didn't do this from phase 1 uh, and and onward, right, they're gonna be having trouble on phase 3 already, because obviously the data that they need to be showing has to be very um, consistent with this diversity action plan.
Mhm.
Um, and then the sponsors of clinical studies intended to evaluate the safety and effectiveness, obviously, of the product are expected to submit the diversity action plan. So
Yeah, and
we
I
go
wanted
from
to
there.
add one step real quick to that section that you had mentioned, that regardless if it's phase 3 or not, this should just be something that they should start doing from the beginning. Once they have clinical trials phase 1 and on, already start thinking about it, and don't wait for this guidance to force you to do it, you know? Yeah, and in
Mhm.
that way it'll just be
Exactly.
easier if you do continue to
Exactly.
phase 2 and on.
Mhm.
Exactly. So the content of the diversity action plan, so it has different
Subsection.
requirements, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So first is going to be the enrollment goals, the rationale of the enrollment goals, the measures to meet the enrollment goals, and then timelines for submissions, monitoring and modifications, and waivers. Okay, public posting of this diversity action plans information.
Mhm.
So we're gonna go over that, and obviously giving our feedback about it. Um, and that's basically how we're gonna go with this webinar.
Sure.
You guys want to start?
Yeah, so we'll do the first subsection, the content of diversity action plan, and we'll cover over enrollment goals. So the plan must include specific enrollment goals, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, sex, and age group. These goals should reflect the intended use population of the medical product being studied. So right off the bat, I mean, one of the things we here at LICR, along with other organizations like Black Women in Clinical Research, Saints in Clinical Research, and so many more, right? We're pushing this effort, right? Because in order, as we say about grassroots, patients need to be diverse, and that ultimately, also can reflect in, you know, even back into the actual workforce. But we're not going to go into that space, but just ultimately saying we need to make sure that enrollment with patients needs to be diverse so that we know that these medications, drugs, etc., are reflecting a wide verse of population, so that if data is pulled and utilized, we know that it's useful to all these different populations.
Yeah, we have to keep in mind that having drugs or treatments that work for everybody, is gonna definitely improve the obviously the healthcare as a whole, because that's gonna make it more equitable and a better healthcare for everybody, right? So
Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to add to that real quick that it's important. The ultimate goal of all these guidances and everything we're doing is the patients, right? We want better treatments for the patients in the communities when they're suffering from these conditions, so the physicians have what they need to and options for these patients. That's the ultimate goal. So whatever we need to
yeah.
do to include those patients in these communities that have those conditions, that's what we should be doing, and we should have been doing a while ago.
Yeah, so this to me seems like it has to be obviously more patient centric, starting from the very beginning, which is taking in consideration these patients at the time that we are creating these protocols,
Mhm.
because having from the very beginning their inputs on how to address this these patients or these specific communities. Let's say, for example, I mean, this is an example that probably is going for me is the most basic one. Let's say, for example, patients with Alzheimer's. Okay, so we have um, uh, the demographics of patients with Alzheimer's. The biggest communities that have more tendency to develop these conditions are African Americans and Hispanics, right? So, involving in early stages of the development of the studies, these communities or these patients that are suffering from these conditions is going to help a lot the study to be more centric, because now we're going to know how to um, get to these communities, and also what is flexible and what is convenient for these patients to participate. Because
Mhm.
let's say if we create protocols that, yes, maybe the protocols involve the communities, but then we have to think about those patients suffering with these conditions, what is also comfortable for them to be part of these studies. So those are things that I say are on the early stages when we are trying to think about the enrollment goals, um, facilitate or make the patient experience much easier, as well as how are we going to be reaching out to these communities, and obviously building the trust, right? um, Other things that I think we have to have in consideration when creating or when developing the studies are also not just the whole study, but how are we going to end this relationship or this study with the patients? Because oftentimes the study finished, the study ends, the patient comes for the last follow-up visit, but then what happened, right? Then what happened with that relationship? I think that's something that should be included when we are thinking about the studies. I think we talk about this with Judy in the past, how we actually like to help the patients at the end, so they have a better taste after they finish the studies, after they complete the studies, and in fact they feel that they can trust the organizations um, once they participated in a study. Oftentimes the patients participate in the studies, they finish the study, they have to be removed from the drug, and now they are unstable. So that's something that we need to consider when we're creating the studies too,
Mhm.
because we need to build that trust that is not available just yet.
So we have a response from John or Juan Estareas. We must continue to raise awareness about the importance of diversity clinical research data, as increased representation in these areas is essential. 100%. Couldn't agree more. And thank
Yeah.
you. Go ahead, Judy, go for it.
No. I was going to say exactly what Monica said, and I think it was John. We have to continue to do this work in the communities that we're in. There are various players in the industry that are doing this, and it can't just be a one-time thing by study. You continue to do it. That's how you continue to raise awareness. You start gaining the community trust, and then they'll be more open to participate in clinical trials in the future or referring friends and family. So that's something that we need to always look at that.
For sure. And let's go ahead. I just want to make everybody aware on the back end, we're doing notes. But for those that are jumping in, that's why we're not making the notations here on the screen, because we don't want to confuse anybody that's barely jumping in. Want to give them the opportunity to read through the document as we're also touching on these topics. So do note that anything that you provide in feedback in the comments are being taken a note on the back end. And also, as we stated, this is guidance, but we're kind of have a condensed summary version of it, because we are going to be here just for 45 minutes to an hour, and we want to make sure that we cover it all in bulk to the main points as to what are the most important, and also breaking it down in a more simplistic manner, because the guidance is quite long. But all right, we'll move to the next section. So we have rationale for enrollment goals. So sponsors are required to provide a clear explanation of how they arrived at their enrollment goals, including data on the prevalence of the disease or condition across different demographic groups. And I personally think this is a great one, because we actually hit on this topic a few times when we speak with sponsors and CROs and other people within the space, so that, like for instance, you have a particular scenario and situation where the protocol is, created, let's say for stomach cancer or something, right? And the requirement for diversity is a certain percentage, but you're looking at sites that are in states that don't have high diversity, right? So it's just kind of, how are you getting those numbers? How is that even relative to, the type of audience or patients you're trying to focus on, etc. So that's how I view this point. So definitely making sure that, aside from being clear on like patient recruitment materials and all of that stuff, also taking notation on how they're considering the study to the very beginning, and what locations they're looking at, and if it's even viable for the diverse groups that they're needing. But Monica or Judy, I don't know if you have any other
Mm,
feedback on that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
just wanted to add, oh, sorry, Monica, on this one is what's the prevalence of the conditions in the patient population, right? That's where you should be going to with these studies. That's the sites you should be working with. And if you're not, then you're probably not going to meet your enrollment goals. And then at the same time, you're not diversifying, right? Getting that diverse group of participants. So, where are these patients that have these conditions? That's where you should be at.
yeah, I mean, I echo what Judy and Ashley are saying, and I would like to add that obviously making sure that when they are recruiting sites, they are recruiting the sites that have this patient population. Um, and then another thing that I think is very important is also taking in consideration that having diverse workforce will be very helpful in this specific point, because you can involve that stuff in the development of the enrollment goals, right? They are going to be giving you the feedback where to find these patients, which areas, how to reach to them. um, it is important that we have in consideration all the points, right? Besides just looking at the outcome, we have to see what is behind, and what are our resources. And there is no best resources that the own staff that has this that this diversity, or that know this population the most. And in addition to that, another thing that I believe it will be very helpful for this specific studies is having everything hybrid, which includes studies that are more hybrid, that give flexibility for the patients, that give flexibility for the site. Let's say, for example, oftentimes the patients are not able to go to the site, but they want to continue in the study. Or because, let's say, for example, maybe a single mom that wants to participate in a study, but she cannot miss so many hours of work, but they will be able to do it, to do a visit remote on that specific visit, and then the next one they can come. So giving the opportunity for the patients and the sites to have studies that are more flexible, I think that will be improve also these enrollment goals. Um, and obviously taking into consideration the prevalence of the studies, as just of the patients that have this condition, what do they need um, to for the site for the sponsor to meet these enrollment goals.
Sure. Well, the next thing is the measure to meet enrollment goals, like we were just talking about. The plan must include strategies to reach these goals, such as expanding the pool of potential study participant, which you were just talking about, Monica, in regards to one of the opportunities is to hire those that reflect the population so that they can help guide, the site better, the PI and everybody else involved. And then, in reducing barriers to participation, making sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to understand the population and reach them in that space, right? And using decentralized clinical trials when appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, for me, more than decentralized, I think um, the hybrid kind of study is more
Visits. Yeah.
It's more achievable, it's better for the sites, it's comfortable for the patients too.
Mhm.
Um, because if we do it completely decentralized, um, sometimes technology affects. Uh,
Mhm.
while if it's hybrid, we have the possibility to also have that face-to-face contact with the patient,
Mhm,
which is gonna be ending on also building that trust that we always need,
mhm.
Mhm.
um, and the rapport with the patients. And I mean, at the end of the day, the human relationship is very important in this,
Yeah,
and building the trust.
that's everything. And I think also the things to consider when it comes to decentralized is also being fully aware of the type of participant that needs to be
Mhm.
included. So if you want somebody of older or need somebody of older age, your chances of, being able to process do something with decentralization, especially if it's a
That
hundred
not gonna
percent,
work.
it's not going to work. I mean, I'm a millennial and more on the further end, right? And so I still have a problem using my phone. I get very irritated with links. I was having a problem sending y'all the link today. So yeah, I mean, and especially because technology is this day. I mean, we know a lot of the vendors. There's only a handful that are actually doing really great work, but they're still always building back on their current model. Why? Because it can always be better, and we're still learning in that space. So I just feel like most in most cases you're gonna have an issue with that if you don't have some sort of hybrid
Yeah, it
with.
has to be even for like a hybrid for technology too. Like for example, having the possibility to do things either technological ways, like using
Mhm.
platforms and things like that, but then also the possibility to do it like the old ages, right? Like with
Yeah.
paper and things like that, because we don't know if the patients are tech savvies, and some of them are reluctant to use it. So if
Right.
we don't have that possibility, they might not even want to be included in the study.
Right.
Something that I would like to add to this part too is the something that is of vital importance and is for the whole diversity action plan, which is enrollment goals, rationale of enrollment goals, and measures to meet the enrollment goals, is the communication the sponsor and the CROs needs to have with the sites. They need to
Mhm,
involve the sites, because at the end of the day, the sites are the ones that are going to be enrolling these patients. That the sites is the one that is going to be doing the field work,
mhm,
right?
Mhm.
So it is important that the sponsors, the CROs, have involved the sites also in this development, and the sponsors and the CROs to support the sites, because we are the ones that are doing the community engagement. We are the ones that put those boots on, and sometimes we get a lot of restrictions with financial or the budgeting or the support really from the sponsors or the CRO. And we need this because it's a work, like Judy was saying, it's a work that has to be constant. It's not just for that study. If you want to build trust, it's a constant work. It's a
Right.
constant work. It's not just one study.
yeah,
Yeah, and I
People
wanted to
smell, yeah.
let me add something to that because it's part what you two just mentioned is that this also starts in the protocol design phase. So at that protocol design phase, when you're creating these protocols, think about the patients you're going to include. Think about if it was your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother or your aunt, would they do what you're asking them? What would they do what you're putting in the protocol? If you don't think they would do it, then why are you putting it in the protocol? And can you modify it? Can you make it flexible? Can you make it a little bit more lenient depending on the criteria? Think about that. Think about the people around you. If you were to get those people to participate in that protocol you're designing, if they're not even going to do it on your study team, why? So I think that sometimes we need to take that researcher hat off and just think like a patient. If I was a
mhm,
patient sitting,
Yeah.
I want
Hmm.
to do this. And
yeah,
no, a lot of times I wouldn't want to.
exactly. And then to
Yeah, of
add to what
course.
what
Hmm.
to add what Monica had mentioned in regards to giving the site, involving the site when you're speaking with a CRO and sponsor, involving them even more so when it comes to the patient recruitment materials. Because as Monica said, this is a lot of work. This takes extra manpower just to get out there and be a part of the community, and be fully active to be able to gain that trust outside of just going to churches and events. You still need to show up. You need to be there constantly to show rapport with the community. And because of that, I do think that one of the things that fall through is, which Monica had mentioned, finances. Right? I don't believe all sponsors Most of them will do central patient recruitment marketing, and that doesn't work. I mean, we've talked about this many times. It has to be regional. It has to be within the particular area that that site's at. Some sites might like it, but communicate with the sites. If they don't like it, find out what it is that they need, and if they know somebody that they know what can be created that would be useful, ask them. Ask them what would that take? How much financially? If you need a cost by cost, description, well then let the site know so that they can provide that to you. Some sponsors, I feel like when sites do automatically ask for that, they either say no or they say, okay, well, submit, show us what you need, and XYZ, and they do a submission, and then they say, hey, well, we can't provide that to you, or we can't give you that much funds. If that is the case, then go ahead and provide the site an actual template of what they need to fill out so that you can have exactly what you need as a sponsor, as a CRO, to be able to explain those funds, as opposed to saying, okay, well, you do it and let's see what happens, right? We're wasting time, effort, money, and situation both on the site and CRO and sponsor end, when we can just create an easy template, figure that out, do a training on what it is exactly that needs to be described, so that the site can get the resources they need immediately, so ultimately in turn it can affect the study well, help the sponsor, and help the CRO move forward faster. So yeah, we have a response here from Maria Mayen. Agree, more and more protocols are requiring EPROs from tablets and or a link to email. Some participants have trouble completing. Our site does request the ability for Paperform to help ease that barrier. Yeah, 100%. We just had a meeting not too long ago. We had our webinar not too long ago with Dr. Renarda. She literally has an organization called Diverse Research Now, where their full focus is to take an individual, one of their personnel, to go with the patient so that they feel comfortable and they can be advocated for. Should they feel comfortable or not understand things, they have somebody there to help them, right? This is a real thing, regardless of age, even, I think. And so sponsors and CROs need to be fully aware of this. They need to consider these things with the protocols. And also, again, back to what we just mentioned, the sites need guidance to give the CRO and sponsors what they need so that they can get funding quicker to move forward with these studies, because the sites are here for a reason. They want to do this study. But all
Yeah,
right.
and obviously the sponsors to sit in the table with the CROs and the sites to hear each other, right? Because it's not just one place, it's not just one point. This is a work that we have to do all together as an industry. It's not just one party that has to do this. So we need to start listening to each other. And for that, I actually invite the sponsors to be part of the Safe Our Sites conference. That's where you're going to be able to speak with different sites and to hear the industry, the ones that are in the field constantly.
Mm-hmm. All
Yeah,
right. Oh, good,
I
Judy.
wanted to real quick. The reason we're talking about all these different things, it goes back into the barriers we have with recruiting underrepresented participants because of all these things we're mentioning. Is why sometimes we're having a challenge to recruit the diverse patients.
Agree. All right, we'll move forward. So we have timelines for submission. DAPs must be submitted to the FDA early in the clinical study planning process for drug studies. This should occur no later than when phase 3 study protocol is submitted. For device studies, the DAP must be included in the investigational device exemption IDE application. I mean, understood. This is again a guideline, but as Judy previously mentioned, it'd be nice if it was prior to phase 3. I do believe in the future this is going to be the case, but as the first baby step, I think that this is where we're landing, which is completely, fine as of right now. But I mean, I'm personally just happy that we're moving forward, and this is being
Yeah, I
mentioned.
mean, at least we have already guidelines, so that means we're going in the right direction.
Yes,
Yes.
agree.
All right. Next, monitoring and modifications. So sponsors are expected to monitor the progress in meeting the enrollment goals set out in the DAP. If goals are not being met, the sponsor should modify the DAP to address challenges. Modifications may also be based on FDA feedback. I think this is great. This is keeping the sponsors in check. I am not, as far as FDA feedback, somebody from the sponsor, and I know that that can also take time. I feel like that is, I personally don't like that, it's within milestones to hit, because that means that there's months in time that could have already been, addressed in advance. But I guess for now that's the case. But I do think that that's a note that we should make if there's any type of process that can be implemented that prior to the FDA or any particular I guess, goal setting, I mean, if there's a way that some process that can be put in place for that so that it's keeping these things on their toes, not months later in advance. So, I mean, obviously not so much detail, it's very gray lines there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think this is one more reason why the sponsors needs to um, have a workforce that reflect that those communities, because involving in early stages these communities, like specifically the workforce that can be helping with this, and like the communications that I was just mentioning, having on the table this the sites, the CROs, the sponsors, is very important, because then in early stages you're going to be working towards these specific points, right? To meet the enrollments. That way, it's not going to affect as much financially as if they wait until the end to do this,
Mhm,
to evaluate. Um, it is best to start getting it from the very beginning, so that way, um, having that feedback from the sites, the communities, and the patients in particular, is going to help this to be more to the point. I understand, obviously, research is fascinating, for especially obviously for the scientific, or for the science part. The scientists that are creating the protocols, you have a lot of things that you want to answer with it. But then, like Yuri was mentioning before, the studies have to be more patient centric. So the studies are more um, thinking about those patients that are participating in
mhm,
the studies, so we can get these goals achieved faster.
mhm,
And obviously, building the trust is probably one of the most important points here,
mhm,
because even if the protocol is created in a way that is flexible and is comfortable and is good experience for the patients, if the sponsors are not building and the sites and the, I mean, like I mentioned before, all us as an industry building this trust with the communities, um, that's probably the first step that
mhm.
we need to start tackling, and that's done with community engagement.
I do think that one of the action points here, I am not one to speak. I don't know what, these DEI personnel, senior managers, et cetera, that have kind of were hired like crazy throughout the CRO and sponsor spaces. I personally do not know really what their job entails other than the little that we've actually involved with and when they reach out to LICR. My understanding is, making sure that they're speaking with the community organizations and also hiring people, with the ethnic background and making sure that those processes are in place with HR and stuff, which again, this is all assumption, but I do think that an actual useful, real useful way when it comes to trials, because hiring, yes, there's a lot of arguments to how that benefits and all those things, and I don't disagree with that. But when we're talking about trials, direct implication of affecting trials in a good way, you have to be a part of the data and what's happening and what's being implemented at the site level. And I think the best way to do that is maybe utilizing some of that time that DIA or multiple DEI, sorry, DEI personnel, um, ensuring that they're actually part of those conversations and understanding the data and giving their input, right? So that, when you're talking to a bunch of professionals, at a sponsor CRO end, it's a lot of metrics. Sometimes it's just basic corporate jargon, which is understandable. I've been in both CRO and sponsor level, but sometimes you're just caught up in the metrics and hitting those markers and milestones and then moving forward to the next deadline, right? And understandable, it's corporate, we're having to meet markers, but sometimes it's good to have somebody there to level it out and say, hey, by the way, this is not happening, and this is what you need to do, and next time I come around, I want to see what happens. Where you at, right? Holding accountability. I think that's a really good way of actually using a DI person, and maybe that's something we can notate.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, yeah, that I
Mhm.
think that is happening with some because I've heard these conversations with
Mhm.
others that we know, and they're actually at the bottom ground.
That's
Once they
great.
get a protocol, they're developing this action plan, working with every single department. I know that's only occurring with a few. I'm not sure every single position everywhere, but that
Yeah.
exactly that you said that should be across the board, right?
That's
So
great. I mean, I'm happy to hear that because I honestly didn't know, but
Yeah.
I mean, making just a notation on that, that's just for the sake of maybe making that mandatory, right?
Mhm.
Showcasing the various levels you're doing outside of just hitting those markers on the data end that you submit with, if you know, and the protocol end with the FDA, but also showcasing what you're doing internally to really move the marker on that.
Yeah, and getting involved all the departments or the diversity departments in the scientific part is also important, like I mentioned before, because they can provide different guidance. And I mean, that's the beauty of diversity, right? We all have the different communities have different approaches, different ways to do things, and this can help obviously for the protocol and for the development of the whole study. And not just that, but that is going to be a start, that's going to start also building a good cultural organization, because people feel that they are being heard, that they are being part of something that really is important.
All right. Our next one, waivers. So in some cases, sponsors may request waivers from the DAP requirements if they can justify that it is not feasible to achieve the specified diversity in a given clinical study. However, these waivers must be approved by the FDA, and sponsors should provide detailed reasoning for such requests. I think this goes back to what Judy just mentioned,
Mm,
you know, actually being detailed with the protocol when it's being created, because if that's the case, you won't or you shouldn't hit
Right.
these issues, right? If you know your patient, if you know your patient population, if you're already aware of, you know, some of the sites that you're going to
Right.
be, you know, addressing, like this shouldn't become an issue. Other than when you trickle downwards, it's like, well, we're not able to recruit any of these patients. Well, then why? Have you spoken to the sites? Do the sites need more resources? Are you providing those resources? Right? Like, you know, it's not just, oh, you know, we can't meet these markers. Is there aspects and are there situations, sorry, are there processes in place to ask these questions aside from just saying, you know what, we're just not meeting these milestones, right? So I'm glad, you know, they're specifying they have to provide detailed reasoning, but I think maybe something we can notate here is providing the different levels of areas that should have been addressed prior to considering this particular waiver, right? So that you're already telling them, like, you need to have addressed X, Y, and Z with the sites, X, Y, and Z with the protocol before creation, all these kinds of things, and confirm those things before, you know, even considering creating this waiver and submitting out. I feel like that kind of puts them, you know, in a very like straight narrow line to walk, so it keeps them accountable, at least, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the only situation I could see where maybe I can is like rare diseases, maybe, you
Hmm.
know, smaller patient population condition where it's not a huge patient possibly. I don't work in that area, so I'm not familiar, but I
yeah.
agree with what you said.
Yeah, I echo what you guys say. So then the next point.
Public posting of DAP information. Sponsors are encouraged to publicly share key elements of their DAP, such as posting them on clinical trial registries like clinicaltrials.gov to improve transparency and public trust in the diversity efforts. I think this is great. I know most, not most, but like, yeah, most studies really are going in there and providing at least more the site location. You know, as far as diversity, to be quite honest, I haven't myself seen it, but I'm not on clinicaltrials.gov too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
important to share that.
hmm I
More on
think
the
something
websites, I
that
think they posted, but that's it.
Mhm.
yeah, I think something that would be nice to see post is their besides the diversity plan and and this information publicly, right? What they have in mind or what the plans are also the results for the different communities,
Mhm.
because that can give us a lot more transparency with the studies, I
Mhm.
believe.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't know how feasible, how easy that can be, but I'm sure providing that will bring more transparency and also trust.
Agree.
Mhm.
All right.
So
So
these are the practical implications
mhm.
for
Yes.
sponsors at clinical research sites.
Yes. So the first one is protocol design and flexibility. The sponsors and CROs must design clinical protocols that allow for diverse participation. This could involve simplifying eligibility criteria, reducing study burdens, and providing multiple participation options such as hybrid models with both in-person and remote components, which we already touched on.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. We're gonna
I
be
do
there
see this
with
kind of
that.
being an issue again for like the rare diseases, the ones
Mhm.
that need very particular systems in place that are so often. I know oncology is definitely one of them that might have more issues with this because they need X amount of visits and
Mhm.
cycles and all those kinds of things. So I can see that being kind of an issue there for those particulars, but
I
Mhm.
mean, I think so. When I talking about the hybrid or giving the flexibility is just, for example, that the protocol provides the opportunity for the in each visit for the patient or the site to choose to do the visit in person
Right.
or do it remotely. So not necessarily that is mandatory to be hybrid, to be remote or to be inside
Mhm.
on site. So that's what I think when it comes to flexibility and hybrid is more that will be more helpful for
mhm,
the patients and the
Right.
sites. I don't know. I currently actually have a study that is like that, and the
Mhm.
patients could not be more happier with that. um, and then there are some studies that involve visits or assessments that are sometimes difficult or extended, and
Mhm.
that makes it difficult when it comes to studies because the majority of patients have lives, right? They have families, they have responsibilities, they have
Right.
work, and they want to be part of a study. But let's say if a visit is for extended hours, like 8 hours, 7 hours, things
Right.
like that, it makes it difficult for them to attend to the visit, or to be part on the study, even
mhm,
because they might not be able to commit to that kind of extended visits because let's say that they cannot ask on for I mean on their workplaces to get a full day off, or because financially they cannot um, commit to that. So those are things that needs to be taken in consideration when creating the studies, like we mentioned before, and that's the beauty of also hybrid, because if the patient, let's say for example, came for a visit yesterday
mhm.
and then they have to come next day, they might not be able to ask for both days off of work.
Yep.
But if they can do it remotely, that will be amazing, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
that's something that I think we have to have in consideration.
And it helps with compliance too. They're more compliant if it's more flexible. But I like Monica. We're also working on a few studies where we've seen a lot more flexibility in the protocol designs. There's a lot more remote visits instead of in-person visits spread out through the protocol, which we love and the participants love. So I'm seeing that more recently, and it's great that some sponsors are starting to do that. And hopefully, we get to see a lot more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Yes, great topics. Thank you guys for your responses. Yeah, again, this is going over the FDA guidance on diversity, and we felt it was really important. But we also know that many individuals have already gone over this, and they go through the lengthy documents. And I mean, we don't know about you guys, but we like to we got stuff to do, so we wanted to simplify it, get into summary, get into the nitty gritty, the most important details out of it, get the feedback, discuss it, and obviously get ready. So just so you guys know, for those that are just joining in, feel free to provide your feedback. We're just here discussing. We want you part of that discussion. The reason we're doing this is because we are going to be providing our feedback via LICR through this FDA guidance, and making sure that again, our members, audience, the community, that their voices are heard through this, and we're making sure that they're being considered when all this is um, being considered. So we had somebody respond, that's correct. Some protocols are challenging to enroll. Phase two sometimes is it's a very 2 days, money, very little,
Mhm.
etc. Awesome.
Yeah. And you know what, real quick, there was something else I was going to add to that. It's very important that as sites and the research community, we speak up about these protocols, because we actually had a PSV recently, I think earlier this year, for a dermatology study that required, I don't know if it was like an 8 hour, 10 hour on site PK visit. outpatient study or something ridiculous like that. And we were like, there's no way we're going to be able to find patients. They probably meet their criteria, they're interested, but that they're actually going to commit to a day of PK without leaving the site. And they went back with our feedback along with other sites who I guess complained as well and modified the protocol and
Oh, that's
removed
great.
some of those PK visits. So it's
That's
very
really great.
important that we speak out about this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Jen,
obviously, like we mentioned before, from the science perspective, it's lovely because we get a lot of data, but
Mhm.
then from the patient's perspective,
Realistic.
it's just not,
Right.
yes.
because we have people that have lives,
Yeah.
right?
Uh,
So yeah. Hmm.
Jen, love that document. It's very helpful. Compliments of Monica Cuitiva. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Jen also posted a lot of Hispanics suffer from diabetes, and sometimes when that is an
Oh
exclusion, it's
yes,
hard to enroll.
all the time.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's difficult for sure.
Great.
Also, all right. So second part, and we're getting close to the end, you guys. Decentralized clinical trials. So a major practical step for both sponsors and clinical research sites is embracing decentralized clinical trials (DCTs). Remote options such as telemedicine visits, home healthcare support, and mobile technology for data collection can significantly expand access to underserved populations, particularly those in rural or economical disadvantaged areas. Offering hybrid models can increase both recruitment and retention rates by making participation more convenient. Again, for what we were just talking about, right? We're kind of like, I guess, running forward a
Yeah.
little bit faster because we're
Mhm.
so passionate. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely that's exactly hybrid is the way to go. Being considerate of all
Hmm.
those things, whether the age,
Hmm.
family, scenario, financial, all of those, very important.
Yes, but to clarify, hybrid, not
Yeah.
100%
Hybrid.
DCT,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
because
me
that
too.
does not
Me
work,
too.
especially
Mm-mm.
in
I,
my community. No
I
way.
yeah, I advocate much more for hybrid because, like I mentioned before, the face-to-face
Yeah.
part is so
Mm-hmm.
important, especially for something like clinical trials that is, I mean, talking without
Yeah.
sugarcoating.
Yeah.
We know that the pharmaceutical industry in general is not, we don't have trust in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, having completely decentralized, I don't think that is going to help much. But having it hybrid, it does for
Yeah.
my from my standpoint, because like I say, we still have that relationship face to
Mhm.
face, and in addition to that, obviously having the flexibility to do it remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
and real
also,
quick for
go
my, sorry, I wanted to add to that real quick, and not making the decision that it has to be DCT or hybrid for the patient, because you will be surprised in my experience working in a Latino community, patients want to come into our office. They don't
Mhm.
want to do these remote hybrid visits. They don't care for it, actually. They'd rather drive and come see our staff because they enjoy coming in and our staff treats them well and they love seeing them week to week. So we shouldn't be making that decision, but it should be a mutual decision on what they want to do.
Mhm, 100%, and then
Yeah. Hmm.
also considering the fact that, and thank you so much here, you LinkedIn user, with new FDA guidance and decentralized elements will help bring diversity into clinical trials. 100% because it's going to obviously give them options and work with their
Mhm.
schedules, etc. But I also think that for those that are, go really hard on decentralized trials and all for it, like I do find the benefit of that, but I do feel that there's some positive in having the
Mhm.
hybrid aside from the patients wanting it on the technical end, on the aspect of data and just verifying, right? Being able to have a patient come in and really kind of speak to somebody and say, yeah, you know what, I actually did that entry yesterday. It was whatever, I was really busy, so I just put in whatever, right? So now you have somebody to verify that actually that information that was put in the last visit, or hybrid last visit, was actually inaccurate. So hey, do you mind if we go back? Can I ask you the questions again? Let's go ahead and put it in together. So you've cleaned the data, right? And so I think that whether you're a vendor trying to push the decentralized, or your sponsor that likes that because you're going to get more patients, I think it's very important to harmonize that with the hybrid, because you're being able to work through that margin of error that is very possible, right? And so considering those things, and not just who's trying to push what, and whether you're innovative or not, or XYZ. I don't think it's about that. I think at the end of the day, we need to give the patient what they need, but we also need to make
Mhm.
sure that what we're collecting from the patient is accurate, so that it
Yeah.
helps everybody
Mhm.
in the overall
I
arching
mean, at
purpose.
the end of the day, we're doing this for the patients, and we're doing this
Exactly.
for the communities out there. We're not doing it for us.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, we have the condition is going to benefit us too, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
But we have to think always about patients every single time. Imagine a
Mhm.
decentralized, completely decentralized study for Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
That will be chaotic because I mean,
Yes.
just thinking about those patients or any patient that really involves geriatrics or patients with like, let's say pediatrics with parents that probably are not already have their hands full with children with conditions, and then getting the burden of learning a new technology might not be a good experience for them participating in clinical trials. And that's the thing that we want to also make sure that the patients have a good experience participating in clinical trials. That way they will go out there and say, why are not you participating in clinical trials? This is a great opportunity. It's for all of us. It's our voice there too,
Hmm.
right? So it is important that we make sure that everything is done for the patients.
Yes, and Jen, we have LinkedIn user. Yes, we love our CRCs, 100%. Jen, it's part of our culture as well. Yes, it is. And safety as well. A lot of patients put no or whatever, but are having like rash or some kind of flare up that is good to data that is needed 100%. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Sometimes when I go to my doctor, because I'm feeling better, I downplay what happened. And then later I probably, go on my message thing and say, you know what? Now that I've thought about it, I'm a little concerned. So I mean, this happens to all ages, right? And so definitely, something to consider. I agree with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm. Now that you mentioned that, even when the patients are remote, sometimes they omit information. Well, if
Mhm.
you have them in front of you, you having that conversation with them
Right.
there. And let's say, for example, you're doing a study for the like just Ashley was saying, for the skin and the dermatology study, and then you notice that the patient has a rash in the hand because you're seeing it. Well,
Hmm.
if you're doing it decentralized completely, you're not going to be able to probably envision that kind of part, right? Or
Hmm.
those things that you can only see when the patient is right there next to you.
Hmm.
Mhm.
100%. All right. Let's continue on. We're hitting that marker very soon. So, investing in diverse site staff, right? We've talked about this, but yeah, clinical sites should prioritize hiring staff that reflects the diversity of the population they aim to serve. Diverse staff members can foster trust among participants from underrepresented backgrounds and improve recruitment efforts. This is particularly important as participants may feel more comfortable when interacting with staff members who share similar cultural, linguistic, and community backgrounds. A perfect example, I actually worked at a site one time, and the patient, I'll just say, Maria, for the sake of holding the real name away, but she would always come in with some sort of back pain, and you know that particular day she's like, no, I'm fine, because I asked her for a rank from 0 to 5. She's like, no, everything's fine. And, I told her, está cierto? Like, are you sure you don't feel anything right now? Maybe you're just used to it. And you sure, compared to the last time we spoke, remember when you had XYZ experience? How about from there? And then, she thought about it for a bit. She's like, well, when you put it that way, in Spanish, obviously, when you put it that way, it's a two. Right. And so when you know the person, when you have rapport with them, when you see them
Mhm.
often and you've talked to them, you know, um, you have that that type of closeness. And so I think that that definitely speaks to the site staff. I've spoken very openly here that I understand Spanish 100%. I'm a third generational Mexicana that gets nervous when I speak openly, so you'll rarely see me speak it here on camera. But I actually had staff when I first started my very first site. I was very nervous, so I would stutter so much my Spanish, even though I knew what I needed to say. And so eventually, when I got comfortable with them myself, when I built rapport with them, I started to speak very fluidly. And one of them actually told me, "You're doing better. You're doing great. Keep practicing. I really love it." And so I actually got close to a lot of these patients, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not just you and the patient; it's you as well, and not just on the patient side. So I agree with this 100%. We need to find ways and efforts to move this forward, and maybe in particular, outside of just mentioning that we need to hire, maybe also see if there's a way to hold accountability to look what are you doing to implement this particular movement. Are you providing resources to if it's CROs and sponsors giving money to the site? Is there an aspect of resource that's going to be given to that to help boost recruitment, or is this just focus on the site end? And is there a way that the site's going to be communicating with the CRO or sponsor to showcase that they are hiring people within the region and that are diversely linguistic and all that stuff? I mean, I think something it would be great to have something put in place so that we could move that forward.
Yeah, having a diverse staff is definitely very important in all levels, side the
Yeah.
sponsor and CROs, because for basically all the reasons that we mentioned above. And then at the side, obviously, it's important because we're reflecting that community that we want to achieve or we want to engage in this specific study, right? And nobody feels more comfortable than seeing somebody that looks like you,
Hmm.
because it's more, it makes you feel just with that, it makes you feel trust. And obviously that's very important. And these staff members are going to know exactly how to communicate, how to behave, how to speak with them, how culturally connect with these patients. So definitely that part is very important, because if we're working with a community, let's say a community that is completely, like for example where UD's clinic is, that is 70% Hispanic population, having staff members that don't reflect that community won't be very helpful, right? So it is important that we reflect the community that we serve.
And real quick to add to that, and I had mentioned about compliance, retention of these patients. All of that you mentioned that you just spoke about will ensure that the patient will continue to study and complete it till the end. Because I do have to say that's one of many things that we're good at our site. We have very few dropouts, lost to follow-ups. Almost all our participants who start a study complete it to the end, and that's because of all the things you described and a lot more that we do.
For sure.
Yeah, I
I want
agree.
I want to make
Hmm.
sure we take some time to make some comments here, but we have the LinkedIn user specify. We need more information about clinical trials in the community. I participated in a health clinic in my community, and 46% have negative info about participating in clinical trials. Very worrisome.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
If
Problem.
yeah.
That's why the community engagement is so important, because, and it doesn't have to be per study, but in general, because if it's done per study, it seems it looks transactional, right? That we're engaging with you because we want you to participate in the study. Well, if it's done constantly, we're doing PR for research. So it is important that we build this, and this is a work that has to be done as an industry, not just as a specific organization or a specific part of the or group, right? Not just the sites. We all have to do it.
Yeah.
This is something that is very important. We actually mentioned this before, that sometimes not even our own family know what we do or understand what we do.
Mhm.
So
Right.
we have to start there
Yes. We have
by
a
explaining them. Yeah.
We have a response from Jen. There are also patients who exaggerate symptoms. Cubans love exaggerating. Mexicanos too. So sometimes they put, they have a fever and really don't, but having staff that understand the culture helps
Yeah.
because we can call and really understand that patient.
Yeah.
And they have here, it's like, in our blood, but having someone that knows this, it's easy to communicate better with the patient, which is 100% true. They even ask you what part you're from and everything. It adds trust. Yeah,
Yeah.
they feel
Hmm.
immediate, simulation to you.
Connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. All right, we're almost there, you guys. I know we're hitting the marker, but I definitely want to keep making us go forward. So collaboration with community organizations, yes, please. Oh my God, we're LICR. We've been here for 4 years and had lots of conversations, but not a lot of movement. Um, as you know, our focus is the site and the patients really. And so far, CROs and sponsors, their focus is more particular in the employment, which understandable. But this is hopefully this is going to be a change in the tide, right? So sponsors and sites should consider partnering with community organizations to reach underrepresented populations. These partnerships can help build awareness about clinical trials and address common misconceptions or fears about participation. I
We
mean,
just spoke about this.
yeah, yesterday.
Yeah.
If you are curious to know much more, please watch our podcast that we did yesterday, or not yesterday. Was it
Tuesday.
yesterday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday with Dr. Renata Jones and Diverse Research
Research
Now.
now.
Yeah, it was amazing. Please go and watch that. And I mean, pretty much, I guess most of the points that we got from that podcast we can mention here, but ultimately
Yeah.
involving you, if you are having issues with your studies and involving the sites and our populations and understanding what you're doing wrong, why you're not getting people on, it's probably because you need to stop using the same resources. You need to
Right.
diversify your
Yeah.
Think
resources.
outside the box.
Yes, think outside the box because it's not, whatever you're using or whatever you're doing is
It's
clearly
not
not
working.
it's not working. And so the faster you get with that, the quicker that the movement and the change will happen. And so
Yes.
that, or use the same people and just expand your resources, right? It's
Yeah. Even use the resources like the ones we provide, like for example the newsletter that we posted yesterday in Spanish explaining why diversity is so important. Even those little things that you can share with the community helps, because then now people are going to understand better why it's important that we all participate, and the reason behind it. And I mean, that material can be shared with obviously the community here, but also with the patients, so they get better understanding about things that are so simple or so important. And the newsletter has been designed or in like in language that everybody will understand.
mhm. All right. So next one, reducing participant burdens. Implementing measures to reduce the logistical burdens of participation is critical. Sponsors should offer solutions such as transportation assistance, flexible visit hours, excuse me, or even producing childcare for participants. By addressing these practical barriers, sites can better attract and retain a diverse participant base. To shout out to Marjorie in Florida. I know that she's mentioned multiple times that their site has had a lot of progress because what they also do is they have an actual little daycare center or area in their site, and so the moms and or the families feel very comfortable to come in because they have a place where their child can be. They even have, I think, a personnel there playing with the kids to oversee, to watch them, and so they feel well cared for. They feel understood. It's kind of like when, I don't know if you guys ever been there, seen something like this. This is probably only in certain areas, but there's some dentist locations. My cousin goes to one in Mexico where when you go to the dentist, the kids get very nervous. So
Mm-hmm.
they have like this really small area where you can watch movies, and they have like cartoons going on. So the kids will go in there and pretty much stay calm, have their attention on the movie until it's time for them to come in, removing that barrier of like anticipation that will immediately kind of address the issue once they're in the chair, right? So I feel doing these kinds of things is really, really great as far as like the childcare for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah, there are many things that have to be considered with every single study. Thinking about the patient
Mm-hmm.
participation and removing burdens. Like, for example, let's say if we're doing a study for diabetes, we already know that these patients require specific kind of nutrition and a specific timing. And if we have a visit that is extended, um, we have to think about those patients, right? That
Mhm.
they need to have that specific nutrition, maybe while participating or while being at the site,
Mhm.
offering them that specific food that they need, and or not making the visit so long so they can just go back home and feed themselves with the food that they need to eat. So
Mhm.
those are little details that it needs to be I mean, it needs to be addressed, but oftentimes the sites are the ones that are taking care of this, and oftentimes it's out of our own pockets. So this is something that the studies needs to consider, also assisting the sites, and when they are developing the studies, and obviously the schedule of events, they have to consider all these little details and nuances that are part of the specific community or the specific patient population.
Mhm.
Those are things that it seems it seems little, but it's big when it comes
Yeah.
on the patient participation and their commitment to the study.
Yeah, and it'll make a huge difference if they come into the office or not, if you
Mhm.
have these additional things you can provide.
Hmm.
Exactly. All right. Moving forward, culturally sensitive recruitment materials. Sorry, Karina Ordonez. He responded, "That's amazing. I never heard of a
Yeah,
research site offering childcare. Definitely need within Latino communities. 100%. Yeah, and they were actually in Florida, so huge
yeah,
Latino community. And I've seen some here in the region in which I grew up in the Rio Grande, and
mhm.
so yeah, that's definitely a big one for sure.
Yeah. We
And
have a kids area. We don't have childcare, but we have our staff that if a child comes in with a parent and if the parent's the one in the study, they can go to the little kid area, which is one of our consultation.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and then
I mean, I'm going to mention something that might sound funny for some people, but we have patients that for them to come for visits, they get nervous, and they will want to bring their pets. And
oh,
Oh,
in my
wow.
side, we are pet friendly, so we
yeah,
Oh,
allow them
cool.
to come with their pets.
that's so cute.
Um,
That is cool. I
yeah,
haven't heard about that
because they get very nervous,
Yeah,
and having their pets
Helps them. Yeah.
reduce that. So
Yeah.
that's so
That's
we,
cool.
nice.
we
Yeah,
made
that
it
is
we made it possible.
We have here LinkedIn users. Sometimes sponsors have this item on the budget, and sometimes our site provide them with refreshments. That's great. Yeah, everything you can
that's
possibly
good.
have food. I know Dan at one point mentioned that Dan Spera, he mentioned that he got his patients, I think some like a snack or something. I don't know, remember from where. I remember this is a story a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, things like that, you going above and beyond for the patient, again, builds that trust much quicker because most places
Right.
they want you in and out quick, especially if this is
Mhm.
not their general doctor. General doctors have you in and out like this. So that's what they're
Right.
thinking in their mind. So this is, yeah, definitely
Mhm.
anything you can do to make it different. But all right, culturally sensitive recruitment materials. Sponsors and sites need to develop recruitment materials that are accessible and culturally appropriate for diverse populations. This includes offering translations and ensuring materials are written in plain language to avoid alienating potential participants with medical jargon. I mean, we've talked about this multiple times. Again, we just
Yes.
mentioned it central over regional, and then even sometimes very specific to your particular location by the site itself. I mean, I think that the sponsors and CROs should immediately ask the site first, what do you want?
Yes, exactly.
You know,
I
what do
think
you
before investing and spending a ton of money creating content that sites don't
Yeah,
use, they don't use, check with the sites and see what they need. And sometimes sites just use a flyer or brochure. They don't use the 10 things you send and
yeah,
just focus on getting that translated in the appropriate language that works for that community.
yeah.
Not just 100% translation that doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Sometimes the
Now
words
that
don't
you
make sense.
mentioned that, Julie, um, sometimes I have received in the past advertisement that has been translated, but the translation is not
Doesn't make
um,
sense. Yeah.
exactly. So
Mhm.
that's when it comes that in those situations, that when they having a staff that is multicultural or is diverse, let's say at the sponsor level, the sponsors, their employees can check it out and say and tell them, look, this is not very appropriate, or
Right.
this flyer is not really clear, or I mean, it's just some we have the misconception also that because let's say if the community, let's say is Hispanic, then everybody will understand the same, because Hispanics were different. We have many different kind of Latinos, right? We have the different countries have different nuances. Sometimes there are many things that we have in common, obviously, but it's not always the case, right? So it has to be in a language that is more neutral,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's not the case with the advertisement.
Right. And at our site, we're all bilingual. So if we're doing stuff internally and we'll write it in Spanish and then we go through it or somebody did, and we're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound good. Like, how can we change this
Hmm.
word? Because even though
Hmm.
it was translated in Spanish and that's the translation, it doesn't go with that sentence. So let's reword it so it's easier to understand for participants. Because then it can
Yeah,
be too technical when you translate too. Hmm.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I think, but yeah, pretty much I think
Sorry.
that was that section, right?
Sorry. Well, I just something I wanted to mention here real quick. I think one of the issues with the recruitment materials is more on a business end and process end. Now, when you're talking about sponsors, CROs really don't have as much pull on this other than taking the site's information or response and then pushing it back up to the sponsor. I think that the sponsors, when they're going through their process and selecting sites and also, pushing through, information and all of that moving forward, they already have vendors and companies that they're working with in the process. So to push it forward really quickly, they already kind of have that on the back end after they've already created the documents and pushed that forward. So I think one of the things the sponsors need to consider, I can see why they do that. That saves time, money, energy. But one thing that they can do is that already have a process in place in advance for sites that will already request these
Yes.
different changes, but not just, oh, I want you to change it to this or I want this. If they also have a process in place for each potential variable that they might come up with,
Yeah.
and so that's again processed quickly with the site so that again patients can easily be given feedback.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
real quick to add to that, because that was important that you mentioned, that process in place should be at the beginning when sites are selected and activated, especially those that need the materials in another language. Because what still keeps occurring to this day is that Spanish material doesn't get to sites until months later, which delays the recruitment at site, and that means we can't screen those Spanish-speaking participants. So that process needs to change, and it needs to improve across the board for all sponsor CROs.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, Judy, I think it's important that the sponsors do, or the sponsors, CROs and sites, obviously this is like I'm repeating myself, but it's the same. We have to sit in the table to be talking about this in the early stages, so that way no one wastes time, nobody wastes obviously the resources, but we're doing things right from the beginning, so that way everything works much better, and the studies are going to be having those resources, and I mean the sites are going to have those resources to achieve those goals. That's something that I think is very, very important, that the sponsors and CROs have in consideration. Involving the sites is vital, involving the patients is vital, and doing this from the very beginning is the key to be successful, and also to make sure that the resources are utilized wisely.
Mhm. Let's see why the screen is not showing your screen. Hold on. I mean, we're kind of already
We
ending,
do
so
have
that's
one more
fine.
section. Yeah.
Yeah. All
I
right.
will
So
be sharing. We will be sharing this document on the Latinos in Clinical Research newsletter.
mhm,
So, and
people
we
can
will
go back
be
and read.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
sharing this.
All right, last section, ongoing monitoring and adjustments. Both sponsors and sites must regularly monitor the progress toward meeting diversity goals. This requires setting up real-time tracking systems and being ready to make necessary adjustments on the recruitment strategy if targets are not being met. I think this one is a very quick and simple response. It's just that's why you're having the DEI personnel to keep them accountable. This is why we also have the DAP, diversity action plan, to meet those, milestones even before FDA submission and all of those, so that um, you have all those targets coming into place, keeping the sponsors accountable as they're going through the study itself. And then obviously anything else. that we can think of. But at the moment, I mean, I feel like that's pretty wide spanning already.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
personally can't think of any other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
So
pretty
the
straightforward.
conclusion, unless you guys have something else to say.
No, no, I think that's pretty
Okay. So
straightforward.
the conclusion is that the FDA 2024 draft guidance and diversity action plans represent a significant step. I totally agree with this significant step towards ensuring clinical studies reflect the diversity and the populations that will use medical products. Sponsors and CROs must be proactive in developing and implementing comprehensive strategies to meet these diversity goals. This includes adopting hybrid trial models or decentralized, reducing participation barriers, and investing in diverse site staff. Involving, like I mentioned, is vital to involve the sites and the patient population and the communities from the very beginning. Ultimately, the success of these efforts will enhance the inclusiveness and generalizability. I have to read this twice and I cannot pronounce it. Of clinic, well, that's my diversity here.
There you go, right there, representing.
Of clinical research, leading to a safer, more effective medical products for all populations.
Mhm.
So that's what it is. That's
That's
what it
it. It's a
takes.
whole mouthful, you guys. It's a lot, but I mean, we summarized it because the document was extremely long. So I put there in the chat, if you want us to include some of your feedback in the FDA submission, of course, we're going to be editing it, right? Making sure that it is, short, clean, concise, and clear. But if you're wanting to, have some of your feedback after what we discussed, after some time of thinking about it, please, make sure that you email us by Saturday, September 21st at admin@latinosinclinicalresearch.com. And we'll be submitting it sometime early next week because I believe the deadline is the 29th. So we're definitely going to try to push that forward. So please, if you watch this again or just share it, like it, share it with people in your organization, in your company. It's just really great feedback for them to see, what LICR has to say about this. And, maybe even potentially reach out and happy to talk more. I
Yeah.
do want to mention that in regards to this effort outside of the submission, we have something very special that we're going to be sharing very soon. We can't speak about it in depth, but it's part of our mission behind this effort, and we're really excited to share this with you guys. It's been a long time coming, and hopefully the one of the bigger starts of LACR in a really great way. So just keep your eye out for those posts, and please continue to like, share, and comment on our posts and our videos. Show up. We love to see you. We love to hear you speak. You're part of our community. You're our community. We're your community. We just want to make sure that we're always just speaking to you guys and getting that feedback on what we're doing. And if there's any ideas that you have for us that you'd like us to cover, always feel free to let us know via the email or just to go ahead and send us a direct message to us directly or through LICR, either way. But all right, we're going to wrap it up here. You guys, thank you so much for those who attended and for those of you who will be watching later. Again, please like, share, and subscribe, and follow our newsletter, and we'll see you again here soon.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Let's keep doing great work.